Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you all for finding time and visiting today's webinar. My name is Yashwant Narayan and I'm co-founder and the National Secretary of the Criminological Research and Development Organization India. The Criminological Research and Development Organization India is a non-governmental organization established in the year 2019, concerned with etiology, prevention, embracing scholarly, scientific, and professional knowledge concerning with etiology, prevention, control, and treatment of criminal crime and delinquency. This includes the measurement and detection of crime, legislation, and practice of criminal law, as well as a review of the law enforcement, judicial, and correctional system. The organization was founded with the efforts and ideas of the group Young Criminologists, Mr. Rishabh Srivastav, the National President, Yashwant Narayan, the National Secretary, Mr. Pratik Tiwari, the Joint Secretary, and the members, Ms. Megha Panchal, Mr. Ruth Pratap Singh, Mr. Shubham Gaur, and Ms. Avni Patil. The CRDO India is running a webinar series, and the theme of today's webinar is the transformation of prisoners by transforming prisons, a global perspective. Prison transformation is the attempt to improve infrastructure and condition inside the prisons, improve the effectiveness of penal system, improve vocational and training programs for prisoners, or implement alternatives for the incarceration. It also focuses on ensuring the reinstatement of those whose lives are impacted by crimes and schemes to provide aftercare services to the released prisoners so that they can live their lives in a better way. This webinar aims to share the ideas, thoughts, and experiences among the people who are engaging themselves in the criminal justice system and interested in prison transformation. In this webinar, we will discuss the rehabilitation of prisoners, the necessity to transform the prisons, to transform prisoners with our excellent panel of experts from the field of penology. And today our speakers are Dr. Michael Pitaro, sir. Sir is an associate professor of criminal justice at American Military University, USA. Sri Radhakant Saxena, sir, the former IS officer who has served as an IG prison. And we have also an third panelist today, Dr. Subra Sanyal, madam, who is a professor and former senior reader at National Institute of Criminology and Forensic Science, New Delhi. I guess ma'am will be joining us very soon. Before we move ahead, first of all, I would like to invite our Honorable President of the CRDO India, Mr. Rishabh Srivastav. Mr. Rishabh Srivastav is an advocate and criminologist. Currently, sir is practicing law in the District Court and the High Court, Bihar, and has a specialization in the cases related to POCSO and juveniles. Sir has also done a special course on investigation of rape cases from Central Detective Training Institute, Kolkata. His various research papers have been published in national and international journals as well. Now I request our Honorable President to kindly address the webinar. Please, sir.
Thank you, Yashwant. Welcome everyone for today's webinar. Good evening and good morning for the participant who are joining us from the New York or USA. Today, CRDO India organized its first international webinar of 2020. On the behalf of CRDO India, I, Rishabh Srivastav, National President, congratulates all the CRDO teams for making this event happen. Now, I welcome our special guest speakers, Dr. Radha Saxena, former IPS officer. He served as IG prison. Our other special speaker, Dr. Michael Pitaro, Professor of Criminal Justice at American Military University, USA. He has expertise and experience in correctional administration. Now, our Dr. Subra Sanyal, she will also very soon join us today in this webinar. She is the faculty member of NICFS MHA, New Delhi, and she is currently working for the prisoner rehabilitation. As today topics for webinar is transforming prisoner by transforming prison, a global perspective. As the general concept is once an offender, always an offender. But what the criminological theory says that criminals are not born, they are made. They are made under different circumstances and different environmental structures. Prison is one of the institution which is best for the offender reformation. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen. Today in this webinar, our speakers, our experts will share their views and all the possible effective reformatory measures for the offender in prison. So I request all the participants to stay connected with us and enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Before we start, let me explain how you can talk to us during the webinar. Participants are requested to put their questions in the question and answer section. The questions would be answered by the speakers and panelists at the end of the webinar. The participants are requested to tag the speaker's name from whom they wish to ask the question. And the recording of the webinar would also be uploaded on our YouTube channel, India CRDO. So now we can begin. So for our today's first speaker is Shri Radhakant Saxena. Sir is a former IPS officer and has served as IG Prison. Sir is the consultant at CHRI. Sir was also director in one of the pioneer steps taken towards the prison reformation in India. The All India Committee on Prison Reforms, which is also known as Justice Mullah Committee.
Mullah Committee.
I'm so sorry, sir. I'd like to beg a pardon.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank you very much, Mr. Srivastav and Mr. Narayanan. I will start with a small clarification. I am not from the IPS. I was the first direct recruit to the Rajasthan Prison Services in the year 1963. And from that year onwards, I kept on working with the prison department. I retired as Inspector General of Prisons, but those days there was no Director General of Prisons as it is now. The IG Prisons was the only authority, the head of the department. So thank you very much. But then this correction need to be incorporated in records. I'm not from the IPS. So would you tell me what will be the share of time for me?
sorry, sir.
Is there any time limit for every panelist? No.
Yes, sir. We have got 50 minutes for each speaker, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
So, Dr. Michael,
Yes,
I
sir.
wanted to start with certain observations on the topic itself. You see, society's expectations from the prison or the prison system are so many and so varied and sometimes so opposed to each other, so controversial that it is not possible for the prison to fulfill in the present circumstances all the expectations. No, the people expect something else from the prison officials, prison. Human rights activists expect something else. Sociological reformer, he expects something else. The community at large, it expects something else. The prisoner itself, the inmate, they expect something else. And all these expectations are sometimes opposed to each other. And it is very difficult of the prison department to fulfill everything at a time under conditions in which we are existing. I will not be able to, I'll tell everything in the context of the Indian conditions and would like to listen from Mr. Michael what is the condition in the United States. You see, there are four types of people. There is the general human rights activist who would say that there should be humanization of prison conditions, whatever be the consequences, whether the prisoner is reformed or not reformed, but the conditions in prison should be humanized. The first thing they would require is that the kind of dehumanization in the prisons, the traditional method of keeping inmates in dingy cells, in darkness, in several physiological conditions which are painful and producing suffering, they should be removed. There is the sociological reformer also who says whether conditions are improved or not, because the topic is to transform a prisoner by transforming the prison conditions. So the social reformer says, okay, no, we want the prisoner to be reformed, whether the conditions in prison are improved or not, but the ultimate result of the entire process of uh, incarceration should be that the person who was formerly a criminal, he now goes back to the society as a productive citizen of the country. There is a third set of people who would say, no, there should be a holistic approach, as you have decided, that there should be reformation. Or I'll later on explain to you why I'm not in favor of the word transformation. Because there is a category of people who really want that prison should work almost like petroleum refineries. You put crude oil at one end, at the beginning end of the process, and you get a pure petrol at the other end of the process. The entire thing is transformed in a way that the crude oil is put from this end, and the pure petrol is taken away from the other end. These people, they really want. I sometimes tell my political people who really, out of their lack of knowledge about human behavior and the behavior modifications, they would always want that you put a dacoit from at one end of the prison system and you get a Mahatma Gandhi at the other end. So this kind of transformation is, this is an improbability. You cannot make any geometrical theorem about human conduct. The best thing that you can do in the prisons is that you offer a spectrum, a rainbow of opportunities to the inmates who should be asked to match their behavior and conduct according to the various stages of reformation, from a prison cell of 8 into 10 feet to open camp like in Sanganer, where they can stay with their family and lead rest of the incarceration with their families. Instead of they going to the family comes to the prison, the colony. It is an open colony. Many of you must have seen the Sanganer open camp, which we started when I joined the prison services. I started this open camp because I was really afraid of the conditions in which people were kept at the prisons during those days. It was terrible. The feudal traditions of prisons were such that it was almost like slavery. Inmates used to lead the life of slave. I am talking of the year 1963-64 when I joined the prison services. From that time onwards to today's open prisons, there is a lot of change. But you cannot say that it is absolute transformation. We can only talk of behavior modification if we are trying to ensure that the inmates who, out of the cocoon of their criminality, they just come out and behave better. They are able to go to the society. You would be surprised to know the kind of opportunities we offer to them in Rajasthan prisons. If they don't behave well, they are confined to cells. But if they behave well, they can live with family and their children in an open camp. In the year 1964, when I started this open camp in Sanganer for a number of 29 people, it was a small open camp. Today, 1,600 people are living with their family in open prisons, and the number of such prisons has increased from 1 to 29 in Rajasthan itself. And the government of India is thinking of establishing at least one open prison in every district of the country in future. So there is a slow change. The change is steady but very slow. In sociological work, one has to be very patient. You see, prison reforms very slow, very sluggish, for very many reasons. I have noted down these reasons. Let you know why prison reforms are so slow and sluggish. Because of the society, the perception of the society believes that prisons are just like social dustbins, where the rubbish of the society is just connected to the dustbin, and many of them would really like the prisons to remain as it is. With the change in the nature of crime, the kind of terrorism, the kind of insurgency, the kind of violent behavior in the society, many of our community members, they believe that, that there should be no reform in the prison. Let the prisons continue to be as bad as they are, so that people are demotivated from committing crime. Their idea is this, whereas this is not correct. After all, you cannot write off an offender from the books of the society. They are not written off people. They continue to be citizens of the country, and all our efforts, as Mr. Srivastava, Mr. Narayanan also was telling, and the aim of the CRDO is also the same, to understand how their behavior modification can be put into practice and how offenders can be improved upon and sent back to the society. We have to utilize the period of incarceration for the betterment both of the offender and for a safer society, because ultimately the aim of the criminal justice system is to create a safe society. So even if we are not able to make a complete transformation of the prisoner into a saint, but we can definitely improve their behavior. If you come to Rajasthan, you will find that so many opportunities are offered. One of the best efforts that could be done in Rajasthan was that the government have issued directions, and there is an amendment in the appointment rules of the state government, that ex-offenders in whose case the collector or the IG prison certifies that he has improved to the extent that he will not recede to crime, they can join government job. They can appear for combined competitive examinations in the RAS, in the RPS, in the police services. One of our inmates has only recently retired as additional commissioner of cooperative societies because he competed from the prison department. He was in a case of murder. He competed for the combined competitive examinations, was selected, and after completing the entire sentence of 11 years as a lifer, he joined his services and he has now recently retired. He is now practicing in the High Court. So, from confinement to cells, to appearing in examinations, to becoming administrative officers, or for leading a life with their family, all the opportunities are afforded. My point of view is, Mr. Srivastava and Mr. Michael, that you cannot trust reform, and you should not trust reforms on inmates. Reformation should be their choice. It should be they who should be willing to accept a better life. In case you trust reformation on people, probably many of them will reject it. But if you offer them 100 opportunities of from closed prisons, from a cell of 8 feet by into 10 feet to an open society, open prison, semi-open facilities, school facilities, open vocational training facilities, working in open factories, sending them during the daytime to the to work outside the jail, coming back to the jail, open from closed facility to totally open facility. There is a whole rainbow of opportunities, and we promote them to match their behavior with whatever, wherever on that clock, where they will stop. We will match their facilities to that extent. So all these facilities are available. Our persons, uh, the thing that I wanted to tell you is that both the things are necessary. A holistic approach is really necessary. That the prisons should also improve, the physical conditions should improve, food, common men's food should be available, sanitary conditions, hygienic conditions should improve. We may not make more our prisons more welcome to the people or better than what the common man enjoys in the society, but whatever is there, we must make all the facilities available to the inmate and ensure that they enjoy a better life, they enjoy better opportunities, they can choose to get vocational training, educational training, open distance education facilities. We have ITIs in Jaipur jail and Ajmer jail, and a person who passes an ITI from any of the institutions established inside the prison, he will not get a certificate that he passed it inside the prison. He will get a certificate from the Directorate of Technical Education, so that the stigma of prisonization is not with them. So we are trying to create conditions, and I hope this is this kind of thing, because there is a assorted lot in our prisons. If you go to Japan, the entire criminal justice system functions like a funnel. If 100 people are caught in the criminal justice system, only 10% will reach the prison. And those 10% will be such people who they believe, I don't believe, but they believe are incorrigible. They cannot be corrected. So the prisons in Japan, when I went there, I found that they are more of warehouses of reformatories. Because the opportunity uh, for reformation cannot be given to them. They are kind of people, the prison administration that believes that they are people who will accept anything which goes by the name of reformation. So in Indian conditions, where there is an assorted lot in prisons, we have to give them graded opportunities of improvement, and this graded opportunity will definitely give them more chances uh, voluntarily offering themselves for better conditions. I hope if there are questions, I will answer them, and probably I'll be able to be more clear. Mr. Narayan. Let others speak.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, actually, the question answer session has been kept at the end of the webinar, sir. So, if you would like to add something more, sir, the question answer session has been kept at the end of the webinar, sir. So, if you would like to add something more, you can please add it.
I'm not able to listen to you. I don't know why. What is the reason?
Sir, we have kept our question answer session at the end of the webinar, sir. So if you would like to add something more, you can add, sir. Please, sir.
There is some difficulty with my.
Am I audible to you, sir?
What happened?
Ranjal, is there any kind of problem, any kind of issue? Ranjal?
Something
No,
wrong.
there is no issue from our.
Am I audible?
Yeah,
Now,
you are.
yeah.
So I was saying that we have kept the question answer session at the end of the webinar. So if you would like to add something more, please add it, sir.
Uh, I had noted down certain points. I wanted to say, what do we perceive by reformation and human rights in relation to prisons? Do we really want a change in the archaic system of prison management? Do we want improvement in and humanization of living conditions? Do we want better social visibility? Prisons are a closed community. You see, uh, if you want to know what are the uh, which is the administration in government which has no visibility at all, so we would say it is prison department. Nobody knows what is going on inside the prison. So will you improvement in the better social visibility and improved public scrutiny of day-to-day management of prisons? Would you require openness, transparency, and accountability in the system? Is this a part of reformation and transformation, they will say, or providing essential physical facilities now available to the common man in the country, or conservation of inmates' legal rights, which is lacking at the present moment. This is really lacking. Even the legal services authorities are not able to cover up the entire uh, regime of legal rights of prisoners, and many difficulties faced by these prisoners insofar as their legal rights is concerned, or a combination of some of the above elements. Okay, what reformation really do we want to do? If we want to talk of transformation, all these things need to be addressed, right from physical conditions to legal rights to improvement in the behavior to giving facilities to the prisoners to match their behavior to those facilities, and to ultimately one thing which is absolutely lacking in Indian prison system is the aspect of rehabilitation, post-release care of inmates. This is absolutely lacking. Hardly anywhere in the country do we have private organizations, one or two private organizations, which offer. One private organization I know, Prayas in Mumbai, who are doing a lot of work about post-release rehabilitation work. But on the part of the government, there is no rehabilitation program at all. The government, we have always been asking the government to create halfway houses between the closed prison to open society. And because they fail to do it, we have started these open camps, Sanganer type open camps, where at least after passing a certain portion of their life in isolation in the prison, they can go to the open camp where it is almost like a village, an open camp or open prison in Sanganer or other parts of Rajasthan. They are like small villages where 500 people or 400 people or 150 people or 50 people, they have constructed their own hutments, they are living with their family and they lead a family life. So association with the family, association with the society, if you really want to use the period of incarceration to re-socialize a person, then either the society will have to come to the prison or the prisoner will have to go to the society. And these open camps are now creating conditions in which social adjustment, family adjustment, they are possible. And they are really doing a good job. These open camps are doing a good job. Thank you very much. Let others say and let people ask questions. I'll be able to answer them. Let Mr. Michael say what he wants to say about the states.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for your golden words, sir. And of course, this obsession was so informative for us and so beneficial for us, sir, as we have got to know this transformation thing and the reformation thing from very close, sir. And because you have been working so pioneer things, sir, you are the director of this Mullah committee, sir. So thank you very much, sir, for sharing your experiences. And
I don't have any objection about the word transformation. I just wanted to change it. You see, transformation uh, would be almost like breaking the cocoon of criminality and coming as a butterfly out of, which is not possible. Human conduct is such that you cannot make any mathematical or geometrical uh, about it. You cannot say that 2 and 2 will become 4. They may become 3.5. They may become 4.5. We have to make all efforts to do that. Our efforts should be to the best our extent to reform people. How much do they accept? There are 100 conditions of determining the result of our reformative activities, and all those conditions are not within our hand. We will have to keep on making endeavor, as much endeavor as we can, and view the results, change our method of improving upon people, and ask people to adapt to the changing circumstances in the reformative atmosphere. Both these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And now moving ahead, now I can see still we have not got joined with Dr. Subra Sanyal, madam. So before we move ahead, I would like to make an announcement regarding the second international webinar that we are going to organize, on 19th of June. That is a part of our webinar series. Our next international webinar is on the victimology in the global south and victims' rights and the restorative justice, where the speakers would be Honorable President of World Society of Victimology, Dr. Professor Robert Peacock, sir, and Dr. Fernanda Fonseca, madam, who is also an executive member of the World Society of Victimology. So moving ahead, now I would like is everything okay, Pranjal?
Yeah, everything is fine. You can go on.
Yeah, thank you. So now I would like to introduce you to our second speaker of the day, Dr. Michael Pitaro, sir. So sir is an associate professor of criminal justice with American Military University and an adjunct professor of criminal justice at East Strasbourg University. Before pursuing a career in higher education, he has worked in corrections administration and has served as the executive director of an outpatient drug and alcohol facility, and as executive director of a drug and alcohol prevention agency. He has been teaching for past 17 years while also serving internationally as an author, editor, presenter, and subject matter expert. Dr. Pitaro is the recipient of several awards for his university service, including 2018 Outstanding Faculty of the Year Award, the most prestigious faculty award presented by American Military University. Today, sir would emphasize on the programs conducted in US for the rehabilitation of prisoners, which are needed to be implemented in India as well. So now I request Dr. Michael Pitaro, sir, to kindly enlighten us about this. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. My name is Dr. Michael Pitaro. I teach full-time for American Military University in the United States. Over here, it's around, I think, 8:30 a.m. So it's morning for me, but I had my coffee, so I'm wide awake and ready to go. I really enjoyed that presentation. I really thought that was enlightening. I just wanted to maybe do a little comparing and contrasting between the Indian system as it currently exists now, as well as the United States. Some statistics I like to talk about first are the United States has 5% of the world's population, yet we have 25% of the world's prisoners. So as you all probably know, we tend to be one of the highest in the world as far as incarceration rates go. We've gone through changes over the decades from rehabilitation to punishment back in the 1980s and 1990s. And then starting in the 2000s, we started to get away from the punitive type of approach and start to look at rehabilitation. However, if you follow the news, you know that the United States is a little chaotic right now. There's a lot of heavy division politically, racially, pretty much everything. It's a very divided nation as we speak. But one thing that has happened recently is that President Trump has actually signed into law the first act, which is part of our criminal justice reform bill, which includes the prisons. To my surprise, after all these years, we finally have two political groups agreeing on one thing, and that is our nation's criminal justice system needs improvements. There's a lot of deficiencies, a lot of weaknesses. And one of the things that I've done as a professor is that it's given me a platform to address these issues on an international level. One thing that the speaker first mentioned is the concept of the open institutions, the open prisons. I cannot speak to that because I do not think that the United States would ever entertain anything like that. We're still punitive in our approach. However, we do have a step down type of approach to criminality, which includes the halfway houses that he mentioned. We are putting a lot of time, money, and resources into rehabilitation while they're incarcerated. But another thing I would have to agree with the speaker on is that change has to come from within each of us. I'm Italian, so I talk with my hands, so bear with me when I do that. Change has to come from within each of us. So we provide our nation's prisoners with the tools and resources to essentially better themselves. But unless they take full advantage of those changes and start to implement them into their lives, change will not likely occur. The other thing I think that we're confronted with in the United States is that we're doing I think a decent job, a good job of preparing the prisoners through rehabilitation, vocational classes, and getting them ready to re-enter society. But the problem is the United States society is not as forgiving. So we'll teach them job skills. We will have them work on coping skills and resiliency to refrain from drug use, because drug use is rampant in US society. We will teach them how to control their anger through cognitive behavioral therapy. So we do a great job of providing them those resources, but when they leave the prison, they have difficulty finding a job because the stigma of being an ex-prisoner is very, very glaring in US society. So unfortunately, many end up with menial jobs, retail establishments, fast food restaurants, nothing to necessarily sustain a person. The other thing is that when you come out of a US prison, you're going to have to pay to be on parole. You're going to have to pay court costs and fines. You're going to have to pay restitution. You're going to have to pay child support if you have children. So with all those fees attached, you have to find some type of employment that has a viable income that you can sustain your life on and the life of your family. And that's where I think in the United States there's a huge breakdown. The other major problem that we're facing in the United States is that most of our psychiatric hospitals have closed down. Or have been reduced significantly. And so that population has somehow become absorbed into the prison system. And our prisons were never equipped, nor are we trained to deal with mentally ill offenders. And with the mental illness, depending on the severity of the illness, it makes it difficult to try to get them to comprehend everything without the medication and proper care that they need.
Thank you.
So it presents itself as a very difficult problem to deal with. But one of the things that, as of recent, with President Trump passing the criminal justice reform bills, we've agreed that longer prison sentences are not going to create change. Whether you sentence someone to 5 years or 10 years, if they're not willing to change and do not accept the change, change will not occur. So we're backing away from those very lengthy sentences that we started in the 1980s and 1990s, realizing that they don't work. In my opinion, the United States has a tendency to create laws without necessarily looking at the future outcomes of those. In other words, they're very political decisions to appease constituents, but they're not necessarily scientific from our perspective here in this group. So I've always considered that politicians need to consult with us, the people who study crime, study criminal offenders, study patterns and trends. But unfortunately, I'm the minority in that thinking because we're still having those approaches. So we find ourselves, from the scientific perspective, doing an exceptional job. But from the legal and political perspective, they're not following through on their end. You know, for example, American society has to realize that if someone needs to change, we need to provide them with jobs when they get out, because you have your risk factors on one end, similar to a scale. Here, I'm going to go with my Italian hands. So you have the scale with risk factors, and then you have protective factors, which are essentially the opposite. So having an education, viable employment skills, having actually refraining from any type of substance abuse, trying to reunite with family, all those things need to be implemented, but U.S. society doesn't do that. Unfortunately, with U.S. society, once they're out, they're expected to just conform, and that doesn't necessarily occur, you know, unless society is willing to assist in that respect. I don't know if anyone has any questions or you want to respond to that, sir.
So there are questions from the participants, but if there is something else you would like to speak, please go ahead, sir, because we have kept the question answer session at the end of the webinar, sir.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that some of the issues that we've been confronted with in the US is the long prison sentences and the overcrowding of prisons. I believe it was in 2002, we were at 2.2 million people incarcerated in the United States. As you know, if you've been following the news in the United States with the racial tension, there is a racial bias. It's hard to really dispute that there is not. From law enforcement arrests all the way through longer sentences imposed by the judiciary, and then of course corrections, making it more difficult to get out of prisons. So we do know that there's issues with racial bias, but also, as our first speaker had mentioned, socioeconomic bias. I think that internationally, you're going to find that most of our prisons are filled with those who we would deem to be poor. And oftentimes, those also will be undereducated, very limited job skills, making it difficult that you're working with a very complex offender. And I like the word he used holistic several times. That's a great term, and I really enjoy that. And I think that's true, that we've always approached addressing criminals and addressing prisons kind of like in a one-size-fits-all approach, which does not work. I like this holistic approach because you have to meet the offender's needs. Is it simply substance abuse, that if we address their drug addiction, criminality should decline? Is it poverty? Is it some type of trauma from childhood? These are all the issues that we need to address. So we have to look at each person individually and try to address them, rather than this kind of one approach, this singular approach that never works, but yet we've done that historically. So I really do like that. One One of the things I do want to say that I think has worked, and this is specifically with the prisons itself, is that our old style prison design was these long corridors, an 8x10 cell. So I think that's pretty much universal in most countries. And the cells were made for 1 or 2 individuals, but with overcrowding, it ended up in the United States that a lot of those cells would have 4 individuals. Can you imagine 4 grown men in a cell 8x10 with 1 toilet, you know, and then no air conditioning and so forth? So the thought process behind it is if you treat someone like an animal, they will behave the same way. So we started to improve our prison designs by getting away from the steel doors and steel bars, and started to add in common areas. So areas where the inmates can kind of come out, they can play board games, watch TV, and a lot of the, I guess you could say, closed-minded generation thought this was a very foolish idea, that this is going to result in more fights and more rapes and physical assaults, more exploitation. And it didn't. It was the exact opposite, because the offenders, the prisoners themselves, felt that they were treated more humanely. And in response, they realized that, you know, they were treated more humanely with a little bit more respect, that they actually then calmed down, I guess you could say. Assaults went down, physical assaults, sexual assaults, all those assaults went down because we were treating them more humanely. That, I think, is very important. Prisons are notorious for worsening behaviors, okay? Particularly if there's any type of mental illness. If you go in with some type of psychological disorder, psychiatric disorder, typically prison will make things worse, not better, because the environment itself is not conducive to any type of improvement. But the United States has since gone through this transition of trying to make the accommodations better, with better food services, more focus on rehabilitation and less on punishment. And then looking more at also improving their, which I think is incredibly important. This is one of the things I've presented on numerous times, is their coping skills, their resiliency skills. And we do a great deal of programming on cognitive behavioral therapy, which I really believe works, and try to look at their distorted way of thinking, how they approach things, and try to change that behavior and replace it with something that is legal and socially appropriate behaviors. So, you know, if you're an angry person, I cannot make you less angry of a person. But what I can do is give you the resources and the tools that you need to work on your anger, to recognize when you're getting upset, to try to, you know, we've all been under stress. Everyone in this presentation has been under stress at some time. You've been angry at some time, but we all have different ways of dealing with it that are socially appropriate, whether it's to take a walk, exercise, read a book, whatever it may be. So we teach those. So they're replacement skills. So rather than that immediate violence to means to an end, we try to work on communication skills, which is also part of, I think, what the United States is experiencing now when we're seeing these videos, is that I think we need to get back to the simplistics of working on communication. I think that's where there's a huge breakdown. I spent 16 years working in the prison system in administration. I truly believe this to be true. I think if you treat people as people themselves, as humans, you'll get that respect back. However, as our speaker mentioned in the first thing with the Japanese tour of the prison, he said that some are, you know, chronically incorrigible, and that of course is true. We do have some violent offenders in the United States that I don't know if change can occur or if it's even possible, but to me that's a very small percentage. out of the very large group of offenders that we have incarcerated. So the majority can be impacted in a positive way, but we need the buy-in of society, the buy-in of politicians in particular. I'm not a big fan of politics. In the United States, we're seeing so much, back and forth that we have to work as a nation. And I think that's where we're breaking down on so many of these issues, is that over 90% of those who are sent to prison in the United States will return to society. So these are going to be your neighbors. These are going to be community members. These individuals are coming back home. And we have to make sure that when they leave the prison system, that they are prepared and that the resources are available for them, or they will fail. And so that's what we need to address. We need to address the violence. As you know, American society is notoriously violent. We have to work on trying to deal with those issues. I've always felt, and this is more of a personal belief, that we need to put more resources, more time, more energy on the front end through prevention measures. The problem is, as you know, as many in the session know as social scientists, prevention is very difficult to measure. So trying to obtain funding and trying to obtain support is an uphill battle. So, but prevention would help, teaching these individuals. A lot of the people I've met through the prison system, not all, even though prison or crime is a choice to an extent, as the speaker had mentioned, they're not born, okay? They're essentially made. From a sociological outlook, we are products of our social environment. So a traumatic childhood in which they observe and learn violence through their father, through their mother, or through drinking excessively or drugging, that leads to learned behaviors. So if we try to get individuals more on the front end by working with families that are more at risk, or juveniles in particular that are more at risk of following that pathway into adult criminality, we would be far more successful. It's much easier, as you probably know, to work with a 14-year-old boy than it is to work with a 44-year-old man who has been involved in crime for 20 plus years, whereas the 14-year-old may be 6 months or a year. So the more you get set in your ways, as you know, as habits and your comfort zone, it's more difficult to break out of that particular comfort zone. That's why it's called the comfort zone, because it's comfortable for all of us to stay in there. Change is very difficult. I always equate change to, if you're trying to exercise more, trying to lose weight, it's a daily thing. It's not a once and done program. You must take active steps, and this has to be done on a daily basis. But the issue is that you need a strong personality, you need those coping skills, and you need a support system is another one.
Yes.
The first speaker had mentioned about the importance of family, which I completely agree with. You have to have that support system. As human beings, we need that contact. We need that intimate connection with others. Unfortunately, though, I can speak for offenders in the United States. Many of them have manipulated, deceived their family members. So they have essentially severed ties with their families. Their families no longer want to have contact with them. They have used friends for money, for purposes other than friendship in the true sense that we know. And I think that makes it very difficult as well. But once again, I think in the United States, we do an excellent job of getting prisoners prepared to re-enter society. And this is only recently. I started in 1989. And back then, no, we were more punitive. It was very punishment oriented. Rehabilitation was something that many believe does not work, or they weren't in support of it. Today, though, it's like anything. The climate has changed, where we do have individuals in the United States who believe that that change can occur and that we should not give up on these individuals. We should actually continue working with them. But the problem is society says one thing, but when it comes to actually action steps, that's where they don't follow through. You know, if someone comes out of prison, the first thing they need is employment. They have to have employment. But yet most of our employers in the United States will not hire someone with a criminal record. Even for a very minor offense, that prohibits them from gaining employment. So there's that issue is really important. And housing, now even housing can deny someone from trying to obtain an apartment or some type of home as well. So I think the breakdown is in the US, we talk about everything, but it's more fantasy. We're not actually willing to do all those things. You know, we still have also, there's the civil consequences. In many states, you still can't vote in an election if you have a felony offense. You can't possess a professional business license. So let's say you wanted to better yourself and go back to school to get an education. In the United States, we will not fund you for tuition if you have a felony offense. You cannot become an accountant or a licensed psychologist or any of those things. So we know it needs to be done, but we're not doing it. And I think that's part of the problem is we're not following through on it. Now, one thing I do want to mention is when I was in India, I spent 2 years ago, I spent July in India serving as a visiting professor with the United World School of Law. And it was an awesome experience. And I did tour one of the correctional facilities there. And it was way different than the United States. The United States is very much an enclosed structure. In the United States, you see big towers similar to a castle. You're going to see barbed wire, heavy walls, you know, lots of security features. So it was interesting to see the two. But I found that when I toured the facility in India, it was a little bit more relaxed than the United States. We're trying to keep it more structured. So in other words, from morning till night, there's activities, whether you're working on programs, whether you are recreating in some capacity. Once again, a holistic approach to trying to better the person. Another thing that the first speaker mentioned that really captured my attention was sexual assaults. Sexual assaults are obviously illegal in the United States within the prison system. We do take that seriously. There is a legislation called the Prison Rape Elimination Act, PREA, P-R-E-A, which the acronym. And at one time when I first started, district attorneys were very reluctant to investigate sexual assaults in prison because they assumed it was, well, that's part of being in prison, you know, those offenses. However, we have since addressed that now. So any type of assault, physical, sexual, any type of exploitation, we address, and criminal charges can be filed within the prison to the prisoner, adding more time. The other reason that we prohibit any type of sexual acts, consensual sexual acts, is because of the spread of communicable diseases. That's the main thing. So any type of sexual contact, whether it's consensual or whether it's forced, non-consensual, they're all banned within the prison system. So they can result in additional charges on that behalf. Because in the United States, as we've seen with the recent virus, any type of communicable disease can spread pretty quickly within a prison system. You're also dealing with offenders that are not the most healthy offenders. What I've learned over the years, and I've studied, is that the typical offender typically ages 10 years more. In other words, I'm 53 as of today, I'm 53 years old, but an offender, a prisoner, would have the health conditions of someone 63 years old. this is a huge expense also on the prison system, in that if you look at the criminal justice system in the United States as a pie, the biggest chunk of that pie would be the correction system. I think we're looking at $80 billion a year in the United States for corrections. So I think that we're slowly but surely moving away from incarceration, and we're trying to look at the benefits of community-based corrections, which is also what the speaker had alluded to.
इसकी आवाज कैसे बढ़ाई जा सकती है? अच्छा अच्छा ठीक ओ
So I think community-based corrections has been shown to be very, very effective. So I think if we continue on that path by trying to reduce our prison population, which we have been doing, and try to treat the offender within the community, we'll be more successful. For example, again, in the 1890s, actually in the 1890s, oh my God, in the 1980s and 1990s, we started to sentence juvenile offenders to adult prison. Again, it backfired and it was a complete disaster. We have since now tried to treat juveniles in their own communities, keeping them at home, and we've been far more successful. In other words, the old thinking of punishment, you know, and revenge, it doesn't work. You have to have some type of rehabilitation in there. And it starts from the day they enter a correctional facility, and you work on that individual until the day they leave. So the transformation can begin with the facility itself by providing the services to get their education, teaching them some type of trade that they can use when they leave prison, how they can work on themselves by dealing with stress and anger and disappointment, which are typically the things that lead to relapsing with drugs and alcohol. So again, I think that we're there. In my 30 years of doing this, we're slowly getting to this point. But once again, American society is still very conservative, and we're still not forgiving. You know, and we have if you're familiar with, oh gosh, labeling theory, you know, we still have that label, and that label never disappears. You know, any employer can do a criminal history check now and find that you were arrested for something. And so when it comes time for a job, your application goes at the bottom of that pile, and the chances of you getting that job are very limited because there's also liability issues. So employers are very reluctant to hire anyone with a criminal history, even if it's very minor. So that's the breakdown. Again, society in the United States is still very divided, lots of tension, and we still haven't addressed a lot of the issues with the racial bias, the socioeconomic bias. You know, I always do this when I teach my classes, and here I'm going to go with my hands again. So if you have a wealthy individual here and someone who is deemed poor on this side, the wealthy individual is almost guaranteed to not serve any time in prison. Then when you go with the racial bias, if you have an African American here and a Caucasian here, the African American's not only going to go to prison, but he's going to serve significantly more time for the same offense before the same judge. So it should be based on the facts, but it isn't. I could even go into gender bias. If you have a male, a white male, and you have a white female, the white male will end up going to prison, and for a longer period of time. So there's even gender bias within our judiciary. So these are things that we have to acknowledge they're occurring, and we need to address them. We need to be more transparent. And one of my biggest frustrations now as an educator is that we know a great deal of information, and we share this information with like-minded people like those in this presentation, but it doesn't reach the people who are making national decisions. you know, as far as the laws and as far as, you know, any type of policy reform. So unless those individuals start working with us, I don't think it'll occur. Change will not occur. Sorry, I got a little cough. And that's, I think I pretty much addressed everything possible.
Thank you very much, sir. And actually, you have addressed many issues which have been faced in India as well in the prison system, sir. And you have actually talked with the remedies of those issues, sir. And sir, in this thing, I would like to I would like to raise a question, sir. Like, we address the victims and the victims' families, sir, and we also address the prisoners and their restoration, sir. But we very less address the family of the prisoners, because at a very huge extent they also have to face some humiliation, and they are also being stigmatized, sir. So what remedies, what measures could be taken to prevent that thing, sir? Because after the after the prisonization of the culprit, sir, after facing those sentence, after completing the sentence, when the person comes back to society, he has to again. So what measures could be taken for that, sir? And what is the scenario of this thing in US, sir?
You are definitely correct. There's numerous studies that have shown that typically over 90%, I think the quote is 94% of those who are incarcerated are males, with a very small, yet significant percentage of females, but very small, relatively speaking. So there's a lot of studies that show that when the male is removed, the father figure, if you would, is removed and sent to prison, the studies have shown that the juvenile male will often follow in his father's footsteps, essentially, the wrong footsteps, and end up in that pathway into crime. That's a huge part of the issue there as well. What we don't have enough information on, enough research, because it's still fairly new in the United States, is what happens when the mother is removed from the family and she's incarcerated. How does that affect the children? Is there a difference in affecting daughters or sons? So, but we do know that that's an important element right there, is when the father is missing, there is that probability, okay, not guaranteed, of course, but probability that the son will kind of follow in his father's footsteps and continue on that path. We have, I'm glad you mentioned it, we have actually started family programs within the prison. Essentially, what you and I would consider to be somewhat common sense, teaching men how to be men, how to be fathers in particular. You know, I think that it's one of the few things that we do in life where we become parents and we have no really education or anything to back it up, and most of us just kind of wing it. But I think for many of these individuals, they have to learn how to be fathers again. They have to learn how to be positive role models, not negative role models. So we have started programs within our prison system to address the men who have children, which is a significant portion, if not a major percentage of our nation's prisoners, how to then re-enter the families and how to kind of reconnect with everyone. But again, a lot of them have, I use the slang, burn bridges. In other words, they've severed those ties over the years with their families through lying, through manipulation. That's one great thing, or not great thing, one bad thing about most prisoners is that they're highly manipulative. And so you're dealing with a very deceptive type of group where lying becomes almost normalized. Excuse me. So we try to get into the thought process and also how they discipline their children. A lot of the offenders that end up in prison are very violent oriented. In other words, every response is through some type of physical discipline, rather than focusing on learning moments. What can we do, or teachable moments? What can we do to our children to help them not make the same mistakes? How could they have handled this situation differently? And I'm a huge proponent of that because I do believe that works. So, but once again, they have to learn how to control their temper, whether it's domestic assaults against their wife or significant other, whether it's against their children or all of the above against, you know, their spouse and their children. They have to learn how to control their anger for one, and they have to learn how to deal with frustration and, you know, disappointment, all the things that, you know, the same things we experience, but we have coping mechanisms in place, whether we learn that through our upbringing or education or simply as part of our personality. But families are so important because if you look at the risk factors, those that have we always use the word broken families, kind of divided families or not necessarily cohesive, they're more at risk. There's no denying that. So that's part of it. So if that's a risk factor, it's also a protective factor if we can reestablish that. We use a program in the United States called Strengthening Families, and I took the course many years ago, but essentially, to summarize, it has to do with getting everyone in the family ready for the prisoner's return to society. And I like that approach. So it's like everybody plays a role within the family in helping this individual. So it becomes a more cohesive type of family than it was in the past before that person entered prison. That to me is really important. But again, if we see that a child is kind of going down the wrong path in life, kind of troubled and maybe, you know, experimenting with some minor crimes, vandalism, you know, things of that nature, we need to be faster at addressing that child's needs. I think I can only speak for the United States, but we wait too long. We tend to wait until the problem is really, really big and then we address it. But again, the longer something goes on, the longer the negative behavior, the more difficult it is, the more challenging rather it is to work with that person. So, but in the US, I know that we are very, very hesitant about funding any type of prevention program because you can't measure it. I shouldn't say you cannot measure it, but it's difficult to measure. So, but we need to work more on that front end to work with families that are more at risk. You know, in the US, we also talk about the money, but again, to me, it's common sense. We spend on average, and you've probably heard this quote before, that we spend on average $35,000 a year for one prisoner in the United States. That's an average. Now, when you have an elderly offender or mental illness is involved, that number or that percentage jumps up to $75,000 for one prisoner. That's more than, you know, an entire 4-year bachelor's degree and maybe a master's degree for one individual. So something has to be done. So we complain about money, but yet we're spending an exuberant amount of money to punish people. Where if we spent that money more on the front end and allocated some money towards prevention efforts, I think we would be far more successful. I really do believe that's the way to go. I remember commenting when we saw this, and you probably have seen the video with George Floyd and the police officer, and it went viral. And, you know, racism is something that's deeply embedded in most societies, and particularly in the United States society. There's no denying it, but it can start in the home, okay? If we teach individuals about tolerance and how to embrace diversity, that's where the change has to occur. Now, granted, I'm an idealist at times, and I do realize that, but I'm also a realist in believing it can be true. It can work. You know, if you grow up in a household that teaches you about tolerance, differences, and respecting others' differences, whether it's, you know, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, whatever it may be, I think then you'll have a more successful society. And I really do think crime falls into that category there, because crime is a learned behavior. So, you just, with the exception of maybe a sociopath or a psychopath, which is like 1% of the entire world, the majority of offenders learn this behavior. They learn that, to get respect, you have to assault someone. They learn that you commit a sexual assault for dominance. These are all learned behaviors. So if you can learn something, you can unlearn it and replace it with something more socially appropriate. I absolutely believe that 100% true. And one other thing before I forget is I'm focusing quite a bit on emotional intelligence. I'm not sure if anybody in the presentation is familiar with it, but it's fascinating to me. And emotional intelligence is essentially how you react and respond to situations. So, when we saw the officer, for example, with the recent incident in the United States, to me, it was an overreaction, okay? The individual lost his temper, lost control of his emotions. So emotional intelligence is a teachable skill in which you learn how to react and respond to stress more appropriately. So in other words, you can be older, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, doesn't matter, and you can learn how to respond in a more appropriate way. So we can't give up on our nation's prisoners. A lot of what they've learned can be retaught and replaced with something better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Pranjal, have we got connected with Subra madam?
Yeah, I'm connected.
Can
you hear me?
Yeah. Pranjal, please connect her video as well, please.
Connect with?
Ma'am, we are not able to see you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear, ma'am, but I think you are not visible to us, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, please switch on the camera, ma'am. Yeah. Good evening, ma'am.
Now it's visible?
Yeah, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Okay. Now I come in. I am Dr. Sanyal, and right from 1974, let's say, that I've been working on criminals. And my first doctorate work was on women criminals. As a result, I became the first criminal psychologist in India with a background of psychology. And my research, it was very intriguing that I used to sit in the midst of women, prisoners, sitting with their children, trying to study them, trying to study their self-concept, their self-esteem. I to stay, eat their food, be in their midst, to feel the psyche, to feel the pains of imprisonment. As a result, I got induced into this criminal psychology until date. I'm working on male criminals and women criminals and regarding their rehabilitation. To the extent that I got in the year 2007, Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund Award. It was given soon after Dr. Kiran Bedi had received to study on adult prisoners and their rehabilitation. And I moved to 9 states alone. Again, sat with them. I noticed, let me give an example. I noticed that the many prisons, as you were saying, sir, they have very good rehabilitation programs in their state. Like Bhopal, for instance. It is just like Manchester of India. The industries were there. I used to go in the morning, sit with them, have lunch with them, and see the skill development they were doing. They were convicts with life-termers, having spent more than 19 to 20 years inside the jail. I had developed a scale which is very widely used outside India. It got published by Social Science Research Net, and it was also published by Psycho Corporation India. It is known as Criminal Propensity Scale based on Ising's personality questionnaire. And I use the scale to identify those people who are likely to get rehabilitated outside. Those who showed some sort of faking, some high psychoticism, neuroticism, I immediately put a red bar there saying that they will not get rehabilitated outside. They may commit another crime and become a resident. So when we study the recidivists, we know that they are unlike others. They are not likely to get rehabilitated outside in the society. They should be put inside the prison and go for further reformation programs. This book of mine, it is now in the market. It is also on Google and Amazon. This is known as Rehabilitation of Adult Prisoners in the Country. This is the first book of its type, and it profiles the prisoners. So to say, sir, I would like to not take much time. I have been even now doing work on convicts. Now, another project has come to me where serious offenses like serial killers, serial rapists, who people believe that they are psychotics, they are neurotics. I've been asked to prepare a proposal for their rehabilitation. What strategies should be developed by the government and the administrator? Now, in this case, they are unlike other prisoners. If you try to understand what I am trying to convey, that these people who are serial killers, these people who are rapists, these people who commit heinous offenses without any sense of guilt, they do have psychological problems.
Yes.
And therefore they require therapeutic treatment. They need to go through long exercises of yoga, therapy, sports, vocational skills and programs. We cannot hate them, but we cannot also leave them to go outside the prison, because their targets are very vulnerable. They identify their targets and they commit crime. They just wait for an opportunity. Therefore, they should be kept inside. Give them skills. They will work hard. What they require is recognition. High psychotism means that the person has no sense of guilt, no remorse. He will go on killing. And when you ask him, he will say, no, I've not nothing. I've been asked to do it, so I'm doing it. So such type of people, we call them mentally ill, and therefore they need not be sent outside. So my work now has gone towards that end. So far, I was handling those who have spent at least 5 years inside the prison, so that they got assimilated in the prison culture. And they learn to live with an identity. Because basically, when a prisoner enters a prison, he suffers from self-identity. He undergoes the pains of imprisonment. So when he starts spending more than 5 and 6 years, gradually he assimilates in the prison culture. Again, time needs for him to de-learn what he has learned inside the prison and relearn what is needed in the society. I noticed one thing more before I conclude, that family support is a must. The meetings that the man perceives that they are coming to meet him, he has a sense of belongingness. The moment he finds people are not coming to meet him, he starts declining in his self-concept. He feels there's nobody outside to meet him. And I've noticed that there are tears in his eyes when he says, I don't know, ma'am, when I'll go out, will I have a cultivated land? Will the children accept me? Will I move into the society with a dignified feeling? There I advised him that you have picked up some vocational skills and bank loans are given. There are a lot of aids being given. You pick up a job and live a dignified life. Need not go back to that vicinity from where you have come. You can stay away and lead a normal life. And people have been doing. They are getting restored. So this is my aim in this country, sir. And I think outside also, I have noticed the rehabilitation model. You have spoken at length of the programs that the prison administration is doing in America. What I'm talking is the rehabilitation model. You have a whole population of prisoners inside the prison. With this scale that I have applied, I will try to identify those people who go easily into rehabilitation, who want to get rehabilitated. Those people who are still in the midway, who are not certain. They need to be kept back. And the others, those on the red mark, are yet to change their lifestyle, change their habits. They are drug takers. They are still, having wrong habits. They need to stay back and get rehab. That's why we can reduce recidivism. In prison anyway, sir, whether it is in America, I have made a global study. If you kindly read my book, I had mentioned there the rehabilitation model of the United States, of UK, of Germany, every place, a comparative chapter is there. But the population of recidivism, why is it going high in the jail? Sir, as a psychologist, I will say one thing is, when they feel that they are not being accepted in the society, they prefer to come back committing a crime, number one. When they feel that the wife has left him, the children are forsaking him, so he thinks, here is a culture, here is a peer group to whom I belong. So he takes it as a second home and comes back. And third is, he comes back after committing a crime because he's unsafe outside. Maybe a poor man not getting food. In India, we have noticed during winter, prisons get crowded because people are not getting food, people are not getting clothes, people are not getting actual medicines for treatment. There are often cases in Tihar. Tihar has a very good hospital for medical treatment. And I have noticed personally that people having any type of diseases, cancer or anything, they come to Tihar just for the sake of treatment, but by committing a crime. Otherwise, they will not be allowed to enter. So they become a recidivist. So the recidivism is increasing, the population of recidivism is increasing, and we start wondering the prison administration is failing. No, prison administration is not failing. The strategies that we have adopted are not actually going to the right person. The strategies are not being applied in the right manner, in the right direction. As a result, population increases, classification is not there, and you send people out, they come back. There's a recent case, if a man, prisoner, he was under trial. Due to overcongestion, it came out in the newspaper. He was sent out. He was under trial. And the moment he was out, within hours, he got killed by people outside because he had committed a murder and come inside the jail. So that was the failure on the part of the administration. So here, I just sum up, sir. It's very good. I thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to meet you, to talk on this webinar. I also thank Dr. Radhakant Saxena. He's my very, very old friend. I know him since 1975-76. And I, again, would like to share that given an opportunity, no criminal is a born criminal. No criminal, we can say, can be dejected and rejected and thrown inside the prison. Pains of imprisonment is very acute. Many prisoners commit suicide. They go into traumas. They become mentally sick. So we have to classify them and give them proper treatment and send them out. They also want to lead a noble life. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thanks to you also.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And our organization is very grateful to have you with us, ma'am. And thank you very much for this insightful words. So as we have all of our speakers, and now we are moving towards the question answer session. So I again request all the participants to kindly tag the name of the speaker from whom you would like to get the answer of the questions. So I have seen many questions which have no names mentioned of the speaker. So these questions will be open to all three speakers. So I'd like all three to kindly respond to these questions. So we are starting the question answer session. So our first question is from an anonymous attendee. He has not mentioned his name as well. So the question is, can we have open air prison for under trial prisoners?
You're questioning me? Is it for me?
Actually, this question is open to all three speakers, ma'am. Anyone can answer for this because there is no name mentioned for this, ma'am.
Okay. I will step in. We have open prisons in the country. We have a very good open prison in Rajasthan. We have open prisons in UP. Open prisons for under trials can be possible only when it is confirmed that the under trial will not break the norms and the rules and will not skip out. Because open prison has certain things. They do not have fetters, they do not have chains, the rules are relaxed, they can cook their own food. So there we have to be very cautious in the case of under trials. You know, there is in UP a model jail, where in the reception center, these people are kept at the first instance. only they are classified and they are sent to other centers for work skills and other things. So in the case of under trials, I'll be a little bit skeptical, because under trials, in the beginning, they may fake, they will say, I did not do any crime, police have got me inside, society hates me. But then, are you sure that they will stay on there? So we have to watch and then see. Open prison, Sitarganj prison, this was started in India by Sampunanand, Dr. Sampunanand. It was meant for those who have spent at least 5 years inside the prison as a convict.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Moving for the next question. Next question is from Manjula Raghav. She asked that how the government rehabilitate released prisoners. Is there any criteria? So this is in the perspective of India. So I would like Radhakant sir or madam may answer for this question, that how the government rehabilitate released prisoners. Is there any criteria for that?
Yeah. In India, we have very good programs. The bank loans are given. Many a times, people, I have noticed in Lucknow, people were given loans to open up their own barber shop, to open up their own sewing shop, to open up their grocery shop. As long, and when that sentencing is going on, they are given these aids and they go on working. Whatever earning they earn, that goes to their maintenance into the bank account. Secondly, you enter into Tihar, you will find that Tihar jail, each prisoner has his own account. And outside the Tihar jail, there is a big store. This is known as a jail store, where the prisoners are preparing their things and are putting it inside. And money that is being given, that is given to them for any other things besides that provided by the jail they get, that money also goes to the family maintenance. So rehabilitation programs are there. Even, I have come across very young boys in Tihar who had sat for IAS and got selected. Companies have come forward to give them jobs on the cases that they have accepted. A change has been noticed. The jail committee has found that yes, they will not commit any crime or violate any norm. So rehabilitation programs are there in all jails. You visit Karnataka jail. In my study, I saw the Karnataka jail. I mentioned to you about the Bhopal jail. Karnataka jail has a very big soap factory where people are working together. The moment they give out all the money that they have earned, that money they will utilize outside for opening up their own shops and other things. It is there.
Thank you very much, ma'am. The next question is for Saxena, sir.
I just wanted to add one thing.
Sorry, sir. So would you like to add something, sir?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing to this.
Yeah.
As far as rehabilitation of released prisoners is concerned, there is no institutional structure with the government. It is only a voluntary work that reformation-minded officers of the prison department, they do it. You see, we allow the prisoners to have bank loans through innovative banking systems. We have created this open camp only for the purpose of teaching them how to become economically independent. People, approximately 1,600 inmates in the open prisons of Rajasthan, they support their family by working during the hour, during the period of incarceration where they are staying in the open prisons. They can go outside the camp at 6 o'clock in the morning, they can come back at 6 o'clock in the evening, and during the whole day they can do any kind of work they want to do for supporting their family economically. So they are trying to learn to establish themselves economically in the society, trying to support their family. This is one of the steps that we have taken. But
I want to come in. Sorry, I want to add to what Mr. Radhakant Saxena ji had said. There is, a timing being given. Those who are going out, they will go. That is the unlocking. and then they will come back by 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, as you said. But then after a period of time, the shivers that we say, the camps, the open camps, they enter there. There is no question of coming in. They are there and they enjoy their life. Even they are allowed to keep their families. Families come and stay in rotation for 10 to
Of
15
course.
days. Yes. So there they are not coming back. They have staying there. And for me, you know, they go on staying. They're doing farming, they're doing cultivation, they're doing other types of cultivations, and families are there with them. They grow up there. So that is one type of rehabilitation we have.
And we have a very good system of granting parole. There is a permanent parole that can be granted to people who have stayed in the open camp
Exactly.
successfully and without violating the rules of the prison department. So they are granted permanent parole after a period of time. So both social rehabilitation, family rehabilitation, and economic rehabilitation. But that is only through the efforts of the jail people. There is no structural institution or any organization, any rehabilitation center where people released from the prison can stay for some time till they are able to sustain themselves independently in the society. I wanted some kind of organizations, some kind of institutions run by the government, run by the state, where for 2 years, 3 years, released prisoners could stay till they are settled down in the society as independent wage earners. That is important. The government should spend some money on establishing rehabilitation centers for released inmates, particularly women, because women are the worst sufferers when they are released. They are sent to their villages, and the villages are not able to accept them or to welcome them back to the society's independent people.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, the next question is from Marisport A, and the question is to Dr. Michael, sir. And the question is, why U.S. prison population is high, including recidivism, in spite of rehabilitation measures?
Okay, do you have about 4 hours? I think, well, the laws that are established are very stringent. That's leading to the overcrowded prisons. I think U.S. society has always been, if you violate the laws, you must be punished in a way, and the punishment should be severe. I still think the recidivism rates, which I believe is like 68% in the United States, regardless, it's high. You know, with that particular recidivism rate, it does look like we're unsuccessful. I mean, it's hard to argue against that when the common man would look at that and go, well, that seems like a complete failure if you have almost 70% of those released coming back to prison. So I understand that. Again, I still think it's on society's end after they're released. I think the prison does an exceptional job of preparing men and women, but once they re-enter society, the same tools and resources and services that they were accustomed to or had access to are not as readily available.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. And I think that's a universal thing. That's not a US, India thing. So a lot of things that Madam had stated, which I completely agree, I've learned are universal. So I think that we're confronted with the same issues, that it seems to be more of a government response and a government action to prepare these individuals. US society has to be more forgiving. They have to be allow second chances. They have to allow individuals to obtain jobs, loans. I appreciate what she mentioned about, you know, small business loans. In the United States, you wouldn't qualify for such loans. So we want you to succeed and we prepare you to succeed, but we don't give you any of the resources, the money, or anything for you to succeed. And that's where there's a huge breakdown, is that you have to allow them to access money for small businesses. You have to allow them to enter universities with some type of financial funding. You have to allow them to even apply for a job. Up until recently, the United States had a little box on a job application that asked, have you ever been arrested for a crime? Not convicted even, arrested. And if you check that box, chances are you would never get to the second stage of an interview to obtain the job. So what do you do as a 45-year-old man with 4 children? What do? You go back to what you know is best, and whether that's stealing, burglarizing, robbing, you selling drugs, you know, it's not what we would do normally. That's not in our thought process, but you got to look at their thoughts, you know. And as Madam mentioned, which I really liked, is that there's low self-esteem, there's low self-control, poor self-image, you know, and you're all pumped up and prepared to re-enter society. You feel good, you've worked on yourself, you obtained some skills, and then you get back into society, and society essentially beats you down. And so there goes your self-esteem and self-confidence, and you feel like you're alone in the world. So that sense of belongingness that she had mentioned is so important, because we all need that. We need to feel like we serve a purpose, all of us. And so when you don't have that feeling, or you feel like you're not given that opportunity, most resort to going back to their old behaviors. And sadly, I don't think that's necessarily a United States thing. I think it's a universal thing. But I think with the United States is we're very quick that once you make a mistake, we send you back to prison. I think that's another issue. Once you're on parole, there's not a lot of forgiveness for minor mistakes, like missing a curfew or having one positive urine screen. You know, we have to start thinking common sense. If you've been using heroin for 20 years and you get out of prison, there's a high likelihood you're going to slip and use heroin. But if you come to your parole officer and say, I need some help, I used heroin again, we should be getting you to help. But instead, we send you right back to prison. So that defeats the whole purpose. You can't expect, you know, a decade or 2 decades worth of negative criminal behaviors to disappear without having some challenges in the road to recovery and to abstaining. It's not an easy journey, you know, for a lot of these individuals. So we can't just assume that everybody who comes out is going to be successful, because society doesn't have the necessary ingredients in place for these individuals to be successful. I still think in the US, the breakdown is once you get out, that's where there's a breakdown. We don't have the jobs for you, the housing for you. You can't see your children because of the laws. You're going to have to pay an exuberant amount of money in all these fines and everything else that we're essentially, I don't want to say setting you up for failure, but we're not necessarily making you successful or providing the tools for success. Everything is not in your favor, essentially.
Sir, I would like to highlight something here. I was studying the prisoners of Arthur Road Jail, Mumbai. And they were, all of them, they were standing around me when I was applying the scale for rehabilitation. So I asked them, I said, do you have a family who supports you? Immediately they said yes. They were all practically involved in the bomb blast case that took in Mumbai. And they said, well, we have money, we have family, bank balance is there. Then I asked them, is there any problem of your rehabilitation? They said, no, we only want to be released. But there was no sense of remorse. There was no sense of guilt. They just thought that they can go out, family will support them, money matters. Now, what I wanted to, after hearing you, I want to say, there has to be an interface. We cannot simply say that correction has to change itself. We have to also see that the society is aware that when a person is coming back, he is accepted wholly with a welcome smile, that he has overcome. whatever problems he had, and he wants to resettle and reintegrate. The family also requires counseling. Until and unless the family and the locality do not accept him, he will like to come back to the home where he has spent years together. So this rehabilitation model, I again repeat, sir, it not only is going into the personality profile of the convicts, it is also trying to draw an interface between the convict and the society. And therefore, I am insisting repeatedly to the administration, even in the case of juveniles. Now, if you make a comparative study, you will find adults will get quickly rehabilitated than the juveniles and young offenders, because they have no much to fall upon. They may be dropouts, they may be drug addicts, they may be malingerers, vagabonds. Police has just caught them and brought them into the observation home. Therefore, what is required is an interface between the correctional programs and social events. Counseling is a must, which must go on regular basis, not only for the prisoner, but also for the family. Then only you can stop the person from repeating a crime and settling and leading a normal life. This is how I feel.
I agree 100%.
In the Indian context, it is only about 16 to 18% convicted prisoner who really require the services of rehabilitation. Otherwise, rest of them are restored in the society automatically. They are accepted back to the villages. They are from the villages. They are from agrarian work. They are accepted back in the community. And a very small percentage of people who are convicted and released, they require rehabilitation services. So what I mean to say is, when I say that there should be a structured institution, a government institution in every state where some of these people who are released from the prison, they can stay for some time till they feel that they are now economically independent. It should be taught.
I agree with you, sir.
This one.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, ma'am. And again, moving towards the next question. And the next question again for Michael Pitaro, sir. And this question is from Manjula Raghav. And she asked that what's the status of open prison in US?
What is the status of
open prisons in US?
In US, acha.
Yeah.
We kind of go by security levels. So you would have your maximum, medium, and minimum security facilities. So as one would expect, if you were to view a maximum security prison from the outside, you see large walls, barbed wire, cameras, maybe officers with weapons. And then medium, it's kind of lower down. We wouldn't have the guard towers, the walls would be smaller. And then minimum security is kind of similar to an open camp setting, but there are a few of those. It's more of a step down approach. So I wouldn't call it open institutions per se. I think we're more likely, I know some of our female prisons do have that more open institution, that more like a cottage type of campus, almost like a college university campus set up. But typically those are offenders who are very close to being paroled, and they have low-level crimes, misdemeanors, in comparison to others. Sex offenders would not qualify, violent offenders would not qualify. So there is criteria in the United States for those that are minimum security. It's typically low-level crimes, very short confinement time, and close to being paroled. Those would be kind of the criteria that we would seek for those. But we're still a very lock them up nation. We're still very much more inclined to lock someone in a medium or a maximum security prison. Even our counties, we have counties which are smaller jurisdictions. All of our counties have a prison within that. So we have state prisons, federal prisons, county prisons, and local jails. We like our prisons. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we have to get away from that mentality and start looking more, or actually communicating and learning more globally from everyone as to what works in different societies, and could we implement those same types of programs and policies in our country. We don't do that for some reason, and I think that's so essential. And that's one of the things I love as being a researcher, is I get to communicate and with individuals from across the globe, and I learn things, and I'm learning quite a bit here today. But the open institution, as you have described it, and as you know it, is not something that we fully embrace in the United States. I would like to see it. I like what you've both had to say about it, but I'm a small guy in a big system. So I can write about it and present about it, and hopefully one politician will say, hey, that's a good idea. But that's about it. So right now we're still, and honestly, with the current administration, as you know, President Trump is very conservative. I don't see any changes now. Maybe with the new administration, we might see some changes, but at this very moment, I don't see any of these positive changes taking place. So let's hope for the best in the future.
Thank you very much, sir. So the next question is from Abhishek Kumar Sharma, and the question is for Mr. Radhakant Saxena, sir. And the question is that when sir talks about more humanization at prison end, what about the humanization of general public, and how you think that it can be attained by the general public?
Since we are talking about the transformation of prisons and prisoners, therefore I said that humanization of prison conditions is very necessary. As far as the humanization of conditions in the open society, the general society is concerned, we have a whole government system. We have the legislature, we have the executive, we have the judiciary, we have administration. We have such a large network of administration that they should be responsible to humanize those conditions. Now, much of it depends. We are responsible as prison officers to ensure that the conditions within the prison premises, they are humanized. By humanization, I do not mean to make conditions more welcome to the criminals. What I mean to say is that all the facilities that a poor common Indian enjoys in the open society should be available in the prison also, number one. Number two, all the discomfort that is created by the prison officers intentionally for various purposes, that should stop. Number three, all the legal rights of prisoners should be ensured. The 436A, for example, if a person has served half of the highest punishment awardable in a case, he should be released on bail. It is now a mandatory provision in the CRPC, but people are still languishing in the jail even after they have spent half of the highest punishment awardable. So all these conditions, people detained under preventive laws, children to whom the police will say that even if they are 17 years, 16 years, they will write 19 years and they are staying in the prison. Our duty is to ensure that all the legal rights of the prisoners are ensured within the prison premises. As far as the society is concerned, for the society, there is a large network of administration on all the three sectors, the legislature, the judiciary, the executive, and it is their responsibility. Prison people cannot function to improve the conditions. Prison people, as Mr. Michael said, soft skills can be taught to the prisoners within the prison premises, but soft skills of how to live in the society, how to behave in the society outside, that is the responsibility of religious organizations, moral organizations, NGOs, government, judiciary, everybody else.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes.
So the next question is from Dr. Srikar Lama, and the question is for Dr. Michael Pitaro, sir. And sir has asked that, in your opinion, shall the other countries follow the Dutch model of correctional administration, which has resulted in minimal recidivism, or would it not be successful in a different cultural context?
That's a great question. I don't think it would be successful in the United States. I think part of the issue with a lot of some of the countries, they're more homogeneous in sense of more like-minded people. The United States is very, very diverse in all respects. And I think a lot of the models that have been successful in some of the other countries, particularly the smaller countries, wouldn't apply here. I know there's the Netherlands, there's a couple of studies that have shown, you know, this more relaxed type of prison atmosphere and environment. I just honestly, I don't think that would be something that's successful here in the US. There's still a lot of, you know, tension within our prison systems. I mean, we have high rates of gang violence, extremists, you know, it's a very dysfunctional system. You know, there's systemic racism. So you have, you know, racial division, you have the gangs, you have the extremist groups, you know, whether they be, you know, white supremacists. Then you have the terrorists that we have to worry about. I mean, I just don't think, I think the United States is just not at that point. I don't think I've ever seen a point in my lifetime where something like that could be applied to the US and actually be successful. We've done similar studies in, you know, if you look at the United States, you're going to have less crime in certain areas. And then sometimes we'll take a program that's been successful in one area and then we apply it to another area. But we don't get the same results because of different, you know, demographics, the geography. You know, something that may work in, say, Florida will not work in New York City. You know, it's just, it's two dynamics there. The environment itself is just not conducive to that. And I don't think that you would see US citizens. I think we want to see the changes, but I don't think US citizens would like to see that dramatic of a change to be similar to what the Dutch and others have done. So I like the concept. I'm just very skeptical and thinking that we would be successful in replicating it here in the US.
Thank you very much, sir. And the next question as well is for you only, sir. And the question is from Anjali Mehta. And she has asked that, as you mentioned, that the prisoners are not given much job opportunities because they are liability. So is there any other alternatives method that state's prison system is trying to come up with to help the prisoners earn a living for themselves and reintegrate back into the society?
Who was that question for? Was that for me or someone else?
Yeah, so it's all for you, sir.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the movement towards that through the Criminal Justice Reform Bill has been slow, but it does plan to address those issues. For one, many jurisdictions, not all, have removed that question on a job application, have you ever been convicted of a crime? So that we are trying to provide some alternative services there. There used to be financial incentives for businesses to hire individuals that are ex-offenders. That I liked. I think that worked out well. But it all depends. It's one of those things that's very fluid. It depends on our economy. As you know, with the virus pandemic, most recently, we went into a huge, you know, recession to the extent where millions of jobs were lost. Now, those jobs are slowly coming back to life, and the individuals that will fill those positions are those without criminal records. So I think we're slowly moving in that direction, or we were, I should say we were moving in that direction when Republicans and Democrats, our two main political parties, were at one time getting along and working together. I think that now we're so heavily divided that any type of criminal justice reform is probably not going to take place. And I think that's pretty sad. Even bail reform, I know that we mentioned bail. We started to look at bail reform, but again, a lot of these positive movements in the right direction seem to have literally stopped. And so I'm hoping in time that we will continue on that positive path of creating the changes we need. You know, even one quick thing I want to mention is that the systemic racism within the US and, you know, the poverty, when you combine the two, you are essentially creating the criminals. And I think that's part of the problem too. Again, if we can address the racism and the inequities, we should also then reduce crimes. So it's unfortunate I can't truly answer that, but I think unfortunately it's the timing is not here to make those changes.
Thank you very much, sir.
I just want to add here what
Yeah.
Dr. Pitaro has said, that America, India, we have very diversified population. Crimes are also therefore multiple. And there to say that one universal rehabilitation model will not work. Now take as a model Japan. Japan is known for its correctional model, and we often try to follow. But Japan, the type of crime, first of all, the criminal offenders are less in number, recidivism is very less in number, and as Dr. Radhakant Saxena said, that once they go out, there is home where they are being educated, where they are kept under surveillance, where they pick up. Now, we do also have aftercare homes. In every prison, it has an aftercare home, but that home is not up to the mark. Japan has a model of rehabilitation. You mentioned about Dutch. Their population is less. Criminal quotient has to be measured according to the density of population of a particular country and the diversity of population. So therefore, strategies change from country to country. It cannot be universal.
I agree with you. The other thing is, if you look at the Japanese culture, the Japanese are more family oriented, more accepting. And when you commit a crime, it's a crime that affects your family name. So there's that dishonor that goes along with it. The United States, I can say we're not at that. We don't have that type of cohesive culture. Yeah, and that's a big difference when people cite, you know, some of the Asian countries, that their culture is more respect in the family, and the family is held at a higher level than I have personally seen in the United States. We may have pockets of ethnic groups where that's important, but as a whole, we're not like the Japanese culture. And I think that's why the numbers here in the US are much, much higher.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, madam. And the next question is for madam. And the question is asked by Nimesh Savla. And the Nimesh Savla asked that what are the remedial measures on the basic facilities for inmates? This question is for Subra madam. And the question is, what are the remedial measures on the basic facilities of inmates?
For the basic, can you repeat, please?
Basic facilities of inmates.
Of women?
Of the inmates.
Of the inmates. Inside the prison? Inside the prison? Yeah. Inside the prison, even, you know, as according to the jail manual, under trials cannot be asked to work. But if they volunteer to work, they are given wages. Those wages go into their account. Likewise, when they become convicts, whatever the work they do, they get wages. Plus, if they choose to develop those skills of work, they continue to the extent they become convict overseer. That means they monitor, they teach people who are coming. These facilities are given. Not only that, there's another thing which I noticed when I was personally visiting all the 9 states in the country. At a particular time, a prisoner comes from unlocking, has his meal, and comes to the workplace. And his food is provided there in the afternoon. He works, and others are also working. So it is literally a factory developing where not only money is going into his account, the prison system is also getting the money. As a result, his skills are developing, he is happy, his family comes to meet him, he doesn't miss anything. And that is something we require, that the mental state should be normal as long as the person is passing his sentence. And as Dr. Radhakant Saxena says, that there's a parole system. So when his good conduct is seen by the parole committee, then he gets released and he gets all the bank balance money he takes back home. Have I answered the question?
Yes, sure, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. And ma'am, again, the question is for you only, ma'am. And the question has been asked by Abhishek Kumar Sharma. And it says that when ma'am says prison administration is not failing, it's a strategy we need to change. What strategy the administration and society should adopt? Further, any meaningful word to budding criminal psychologists or criminologists?
The strategy, what I'm trying to convey is this, that when a person has spent over a length of time inside the prison, he must be placed under a psychological test. If he is already, has gone through that sense of guilt, remorse, and he wants to go back to lead a normal life, no use to keep him there, because pains of imprisonment will relapse him back into the former instance. Now, if he is given proper aid, proper support by the family and the society with the skill he developed, he will be able to reintegrate into the society. So that's why I was saying that when a prisoner has got the sentencing, that means he has become a convict. The benchmark is 5 years to keep him under surveillance. Then after that, think of sending him outside, or think of giving him some sort of duty, some sort of work, so that he is able to reclaim, because we all human beings, whether you or me, we bank on our self-concept. We bank on the respect that we get from others. And if a man, after changing himself, goes on feeling that he is still a convict, continues saying that his family is suffering, nothing can change him, nothing can reform him. So my thing is, when I was saying the correctional strategy needs to change, correction needs to correct itself. We are going on from the very old cases. You read the jail manual amendments are going on, but the structure remains the same. That is what I'm trying to convey, that here the correction system should now modify itself. And the prisoners who are coming, not parole, but those who are changing, who are really wanting to work for the society, who are going through a sense of guilt, after 5 years, think of releasing them on the scale. I have the scale is being used everywhere now. On that scale, if you feel, yes, the person has changed, he has no high aggression, no frustration, he is willing to resettle with all other things, he should be allowed. But yes, there is a follow-up. If follow-up is needed for young offenders, if follow-up is needed for adult offenders, he may be a good man. He is going out into the society. But then there are some bad people who come and again throw him into the gutter. Throw him into drugs, accuse him of something, so that he gets provoked. If you study the prison population, most of the prisoners are victims themselves. They are victimized for their own crimes. They are victims of situations, victims of their own emotional pranks, victims of provocations, or they have been framed in our Indian culture. So therefore, we are victimizing him further by keeping them 15 years, 20 years. All the skills that they've learned, they forget. This is what I'm saying. The correction system should start classifying the prisoners on the basis of their reforms and try to rehabilitate them positively outside. My summing up what I'm working, and I'm working repeatedly, there should be an interface between institution and non-institution programs. It has to be an interface between institutional treatment and aftercare programs. We cannot leave a person the moment he's left. The follow-up has to be there. In case he has hurdles, he should be brought back. He should be, by the probation officer, by the parole officer, seen that the hurdle he overcomes and gets back.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And we are now moving towards our last question of the session, and that is by me for Dr. Michael Pitaro, sir. Sir, my question is, there are many prisoners who have been incarcerated for the misdemeanor or some petty offenses. So is there any provision of community service in US for this kind of offenders, and how it has impacted in reducing the overcrowding of prisons?
It has, and this is a recent change where we're starting to look at minor offenses, if you would, and trying to actually have them serve out in some type of alternative means. One that I'm very fond of, and it's not utilized enough, is house arrest with GPS monitoring. It's very inexpensive. It's a third party that oversees it, similar to an alarm system on your home. You know, I think, don't quote me on the exact figure, but say it's like $20 a day or $25 a day. But compared to the US price of $200 to maybe $400 a day. So it's cost effective, but it's also been shown to be more effective in reducing recidivism. So we need to start utilizing these alternatives that are at our disposal and have been at our disposal. But we need to get out of that mindset of punishment, 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 and look at the aspect of, okay, there's a punishment, but make it fit the crime more appropriately. I'll give you an example. I always give this example in my classes, and this is a true story. An individual went to a grocery store and stole ground beef, okay, $10 worth. I'm not sure what it converts to in rupee, but it's similar in the conversion. So say $10. And then he was sentenced to 35 days in jail at the rate of $200 a day for $10 worth of food. That, I mean, just from a cost-effective stance, that doesn't make any sense. And what is he learning necessarily from the incarceration? He could have been better served on house arrest. If you're a proponent of shaming, which is popular in Australia and some countries, I'm not necessarily, it depends how it's utilized, but you can have him apologize to the store owner, you know, do something of that nature as opposed to putting him in a confined facility. So I think we have great services available, and they're very cost effective for not just the government, but also for the offenders. And if you are deemed to be indigent, to be poor, the government pays for the GPS monitoring, which pales in comparison to the cost of incarceration. So it's really common sense. I like using this a lot. Common sense, in my opinion, to utilize these services that are available and have been available for decades. But why we're not utilizing them at the extent we should be, I think it's, once again, it's more of the culture within our judiciary of, you know, constantly focusing on punishment, 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 and incarceration. I think one of the big conflicts is that a lot of the individuals are elected officials. So you're relying on your constituent base to appeal to them. Most US citizens want people to be locked up, incarcerated, even though the studies have not shown that that's going to reduce, you know, criminality. I mean, so they have to, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that in order for all of us in this session to be successful, is really, it has to be this approach that includes government and non-government entities, as well as private industry. Crime affects all of us. Look at us in the room. We're sharing very similarities here. That it's one of those things where you need, what's the African proverb? It takes a village to raise a child. This comes true here. To really, truly eradicate this, we need an entire approach that everybody's involved. But in the United States, we tend to put all the pressure and point all the responsibility to corrections, and that's it. But that's where we're having a breakdown. The Department of Corrections at a state level or a national level, one organization cannot change society and what has been deeply embedded in our culture for decades, if not hundreds of years. So change has to occur society-wide. It has to, that's where it has to occur. And private industries, which has the money, they can develop programs. You know, so we can tap into the resources, again, that are already in place But why we're not doing it, I don't have an answer. I think that's part of the breakdown. To me, it seems logical and it you know, to do that, but why we're not, I can't answer that.
Thank you very much, sir, and I have got the answer of my question. So as we are moving towards the end of today's webinar, I'd like to ask from the speakers that is there something that they would like to mention about the webinar?
I'll go first, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
I really enjoyed this. Like I said a couple minutes ago, I enjoy participating in these webinars because I always walk away with new information. I'm a lifelong learner, so I always like to, you know, learn from others, you know, to see what other countries are doing, what's working, what's not working. Again, I think to really truly combat crime, we need to start talking globally, which I think is a breakdown, you know, to share what's working, what's not working. But I love this session. I really enjoyed all the speakers. I enjoyed the questions. I thought this was exceptional, and I'm glad that I was invited, and I appreciate that.
I would like to share here, I'm not used to this webinar, but because of these young friends of mine, repeatedly they were trying to link me. I was absolutely sure, and my husband was also telling, leave it. But then I didn't give up because I found that they were recklessly ringing me up, sending me links. I said, they are so highly motivated, I must come. And sir, I really enjoyed listening to you, as well as to my old friend, Dr. Radhakant Saxena. And I'm feeling proud now that this webinar, I'm getting gradually used to. I've been to seminars, but not to webinars. That this, in spite of social distancing, at least have brought us into mental closeness. And we have really been able to see each other, share our views, and talk on. I really enjoyed it. I thank you all once again, sir. I thank you all the organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, ma'am. And I think we have lost the connection of Radhakant, sir. So moving forward, so before ending the session and before calling for the vote of thanks, I would like to again announce about the second year international webinar that we are going to organize on 19th of June. And the theme of the webinar would be Victimology in Global South, Victims' Rights and Restorative Justice, where our distinguished speaker would be Professor Dr. Robert Peacock, who is the Honorable President of the World Society of Victimology, and Professor Dr. Fernanda Fonseca Rosenblatt, who is also the executive member of the World Society of Victimology. So that's all from my side. Now I request the Joint Secretary of our organization, Mr. Pratikshit Tiwari, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks. Please, sir.
Thank you, Yashwant. It was a really informative session. Thank you, sir and madam, and thank you, especially madam, for not giving us upon us and really joining us. So at last, on the behalf of CRDO India, I would like to extend my gratitude to our respected speakers and all the participants, and especially our technical team, Pranjal Srivastav and Mohit Salvi, and the members of the CRDO India. That's all from today for today's webinar. Thank you. And I hope to see you in our upcoming webinars. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you all attendees and speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.